So today you are joining me on my bedroom floor to talk a little bit about how to care for your ball python. This video was recently requested by Jordan Hughes, who comments on all my videos, and he is always so nice and so supportive. So thank you, Jordan. So yeah, let's just get into it. So ball pythons are originally from Africa, and it's actually thought that ancient Egyptian queens and pharaohs would wear them as living jewelry. Ball pythons come in so many different morphs and color combinations that it's actually crazy. I can spend so much time just scrolling through MorphMark and Instagram looking at all the different color combinations. But in the wild, they come in their normal color, and they also come in banana. So this is what sterling is right here, and pied, which is my absolute favorite coloring on a ball python. These guys can get anywhere from about 3 to 6 feet, with the females getting larger than the males. Sterling here is a full-grown adult male, and he is a little over 3 foot, almost 4 foot long, and then the females will get up to 5-6 foot. Just know that if you're going to get one of these guys, they can live for over 30 years. So this is a long-term investment. They're awesome though, and I think they're very much worth it. So let's talk about their habitat. People keep ball pythons in all different ways. So I'm just going to talk about keeping them in tanks because that's the only way that I've ever kept them. I know that a lot of people, especially breeders, will keep them in rack systems, but I know absolutely nothing about that. So it's usually recommended that an adult ball python be kept in a 40-gallon breeder, and that is what sterling is in here. I would actually recommend a vision cage because ball pythons are very secretive and shy creatures, and they like tight and closed spaces where they can hide away. I don't have vision cages for mine just because they are very expensive. I'll be upgrading to those eventually, but for right now, what I've found works best for me is actually I just have my glass tank, and there's a background in the back, and then I actually on the sides here have just a black poster board that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I cut it up and I put it on each side, and instantly it made him feel more enclosed. He went from not really wanting to come out to being out every single night and exploring his tank every single night. With that being said though, my husband's snake Sylvanas, the really grumpy one, she's almost a full-grown female, and she does not like being in a 40-gallon tank. She is still in a 20-gallon long. We've tried to move her to a 40-gallon breeder 3 times now, and every single time that we do, she refuses to come out. She won't change from her hot side to her cool side. She stays in her hot side in the most enclosed spot of the tank, and she will not come out. So all that is just to say that you should do whatever works best for your snake. So in your tank, you're going to want to have lots of hiding spaces because, as I said, they are very secretive animals. So in Sterling's tank, for his hot hide, which is over here, he has like I think it's an extra large Exoterra rock hide that he can fit his whole body in. It's completely enclosed on all sides, and he loves that hide. And then he has a couple of little hiding spaces that I just made out of rocks and wood and leaves. But for store-bought hides, you can use the caves. A lot of people use the half logs that you can buy at the pet store. They also sell like just plastic boxes, which work really well too. The snakes like those. You can also have a third hide in there, a moist hide for them to go into if they're about to shed. I don't have that for Sterling because I take Sterling out every single day, and I know when he's about to shed. And when that happens, I just put sphagnum moss in his main hide so that way he can get that shed off. But if you're not going to have your snake out every day, or you can't necessarily tell when they're about to shed, which we'll talk about that later, I would recommend having a moist hide in there so that they can go into if they are about to shed. As far as substrate, you can always default to paper towels and newspapers. I like to use something that does a really good job of keeping my humidity where it needs to be, so I use ReptiBark, and I feel like that does a good job, and I like how it looks, so we use that in both of the ball python tanks. I know that some people use aspen bedding, but I find that that doesn't do as good of a job as holding in humidity. You need to spot clean your snake's tank as soon as you see that they've pooped or left urate in the tank. And you also need to clean the tank thoroughly about once a month with a reptile disinfectant, and you can change the bedding and all of that when you give that tank a deep clean. As far as temperatures and humidity, these guys like a pretty high humidity. It needs to stay between about 50 and 60%, and of course if they're shedding, that needs to be higher, or they need to at least be able to get to a place where it's higher. So to keep that humidity up to where you need it to be, I use a mister that I got from Walmart, or you can just use a normal spray bottle. This came from the Dollar Tree. And you want to make sure to treat any water that you put into the tank with ReptiSafe, just because normal water has chlorine in it, and ReptiSafe will take out that chlorine. It'll also add calcium to the water, which is really cool. And for the temperatures, you want to keep his hot spot at about 88 to 96 degrees. That's the temperature that he needs to be able to go to and get his belly heat so he can digest his food. I wouldn't recommend having lights, like heat lights. I do have lights up here, but that's just so you guys can see in the tank. This light isn't normally there. I usually just keep this very dim LED light on top just so he can differentiate between night and day. But generally you don't want to have lights. Heat pads are going to be the best way to go. I always recommend having a thermostat in your tank as well. You can see mine on this back wall right here. But definitely keep your heat pad on a thermostat, because heat pads do overheat sometimes. If your heat pad overheats, it can cause fires, it can completely melt, it can overheat and burn your snake. So you don't want any of those things to happen. Other than the hot spot, the ambient temperature in the tank needs to stay around 78 to 80 degrees. So let's talk about shedding. We've already talked a little bit about how important it is to keep the humidity levels in your tank correct so that your snake can have a healthy shed. But I wanted to talk a little bit about good sheds versus bad sheds. So a good shed for a snake is the typical sheds in all in one piece that we normally see. But a snake can also have a bad shed if the humidity levels aren't right or if they're sick. And with a bad shed, little pieces will come off. So little pieces come off all over their body, and they can sometimes stick to the snake and not come off, and that can be especially dangerous if the eye caps stick and don't come off, because they could have eye infections and then you have to take them to the vet. So we want to make sure the temperatures and humidity are correct.
So as I'm editing this, I realized that I forgot to tell you how to tell if your snake is about to shed, which is pretty important because you don't want to handle them when they're about to shed, because they actually go blind for a little bit. You want to look for a pink belly. Their eyes will go cloudy or sometimes even blue, and their overall appearance, like their color, will be really dull.
So you're going to want to feed your snake frozen thawed rodents as opposed to live ones, and the biggest reason for that is that ball pythons are so passive, and if a rat starts biting at them or attacking them, a lot of the times they won't fight back. However, you should know that sometimes you might have to feed your snake a live rodent. When we first got Sylvanas, she was not ever handled, and she was also fed live rodents. So she refused to eat frozen thawed. So we kind of had to work our way up to getting her to frozen thawed. But we did eventually get her to frozen thawed, and she takes them now no problem. For a newborn ball python, you're going to feed them pinky mice, and you're going to slowly work your way up to rat pups, and that's the smallest little rats that there are, just because a rat pup is too big for a newborn ball python. But rats are more filling of a meal for ball pythons than mice are. So you're going to want to feed your ball python based on how thick the biggest part of their body is. Ball pythons are usually going to eat about once a week, but when they're full grown, they'll eat every 10 to 14 days and sometimes even a little less. Sterling eats every 2 to 3 weeks. I offer him food starting at the 2-week mark, and sometimes he'll take it and sometimes he'll wait a 3rd week. And Sylvanas will actually eat every single week, every time it's offered, no hesitation. The hardest thing about ball pythons is that they can be very stubborn eaters. So it's not unheard of for a ball python to go a month or 2 without eating anything. This last time, Sterling went about a month and a half without eating, and that's just how he is. If you're concerned about your ball python not eating, the The very first thing that I would check is the temperatures, because ball pythons have to have that hot spot at the right temperature in order to digest their food. So if their hot spot isn't right, there is a large possibility that they won't eat. But other than that, it can be completely normal for them not to eat. As long as they're not losing weight and they're still acting like they normally act, then it's not a concern at all. And to weigh them, you can buy just like a kitchen scale. I bought this one off of Amazon, and that's what I use to weigh all my reptiles. But these guys are notoriously stubborn eaters. So you're going to want to handle your snake at least 2 to 3 times a week. Because if you start getting to where you don't handle them, and then the only time you're opening the tank is to feed them, you can open the tank one day to try to handle them, and they can mistake you for food, and you could get bit. If you just got your ball python, I would suggest giving him a week or 2 just to kind of get settled into his new habitat. Another thing is you don't really want to handle them the day that you feed them or for a day after you feed them. Regurgitation of food is very possible, and it's a very stressful and painful situation for the snake, and you don't want that to happen. When you're taking your snake out of the tank, you never want to reach for his head. Ball pythons generally do not like being touched on their heads, and reaching directly at their heads can cause them to mistake you for food and bite you. If you have a front opening tank or a vision cage and you can't really grab the snake from any place other than its head, you can always get a snake hook and kind of turn them around as you're grabbing them to avoid grabbing them at the head. One thing about the temperament of ball pythons is that they are very shy and passive animals. They get their name ball pythons because if they feel threatened, normally as opposed to striking, they will just curl up into a ball. However, it is very possible to get a ball python that is aggressive. I don't think that this is something that happens very often. Our first ball python, Sylvanus, is pretty aggressive. We got her before we knew any better about breeders and things like that, and we got her from not the best breeder. We had to kind of work with her a little to calm her down, but if you do happen to get a ball python that is aggressive, I would actually handle them more because they need to get used to that interaction. And also, when you go to reach for them in the tank, what worked with her was kind of taking her hide and covering her head. And we still use a snake hook as well from time to time on her. It's not going to hurt you if your ball python bites you. I mean, it's going to sting a little, but that's about it. But you could hurt your animal. If their fangs get stuck and you yank back when they bite you, their fangs could actually break or fall out, and it could cause infections. So if that happens, the best thing to do is put your hand under cold water, and when the cold water hits the ball python, they should let go. The most important thing though is just to stay calm. So if you watch this video and you are ready to get a ball python, the next question would be where to get one. Ball pythons are available anywhere and everywhere that reptiles are sold. I would personally suggest getting one from ReptiCon or a local breeder or a local pet shop that you know uses good, reputable breeders, as opposed to getting one from chain stores like Petco and PetSmart, because they are pretty notorious for treating their animals badly, or getting them from reptile mills that treat the animals badly. Another reason not to get your ball python from a retail store, even though this reason is nowhere near as important as the first, is that retail stores sell these animals for much more than reptile shows and the breeders themselves do. So if you went to ReptiCon and you were to buy a normal ball python, you'd probably spend about $25 to $30, whereas if you went to Petco, PetSmart, you'd spend $60 to $70. So that means at reptile shows you get a bigger selection and more colors to choose from for cheaper than if you go to a retail store. No matter where you get it from, I would definitely make sure to look at and inspect the animal first, just to make sure that he looks like he's in good health. And if you can, look up the breeders beforehand. ReptiCon actually has a list of breeders that will be at the show, and kind of do some research about the breeder beforehand to make sure that it'll be a good snake. So yeah guys, I think that's about it. If you're getting your first ball python soon, that should be enough information to get you started and well into caring for your ball python. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye.